A close associate of Matt Gaetz is accepting a deal with prosecutors and pleading guilty to multiple federal charges, including child sex trafficking. Joel Greenberg also agreed to cooperate with a reported investigation into the Florida Republican congressman as the Justice Department considers whether to bring charges against Gaetz, a Donald Trump ally. Court papers say Greenberg engaged in so-called sugar daddy relationships where he paid for sex. But they don't mention Gaetz by name. During a rally over the weekend in Ohio, Congressman Gaetz continued to fiercely maintain his innocence and dismiss the child trafficking allegations. Nikole Killion reports.
This morning, the man Congressman Matt Gaetz has called his wingman, Joel Greenberg, is expected to plead guilty to 6 federal charges, ranging from child sex trafficking to wire fraud. According to his plea agreement, Greenberg admits to being involved in sugar daddy relationships where he paid women for sex, including a minor that he introduced to other adult men who engaged in commercial sex acts. Multiple sources tell CBS News one of those men was Gaetz, and federal investigators are looking into whether he had a sexual relationship when the girl was 17.
How concerned should Congressman Gaetz be right now?
Congressman Gaetz needs to be concerned even if he is 100% innocent.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman.
The details that have leaked out in this investigation are really, on the one hand, a bit titillating, and on the other hand, certainly sordid and disturbing. These are the types of crimes that simply the rumor of that kind of activity makes you look skeptically at someone, even if they're presumed innocent.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Gaetz declined to speak with us, but his spokesperson said Congressman Gaetz doesn't seem to be named nor referenced in Mr. Greenberg's plea. Congressman Gaetz has never had sex with a minor and has never paid for sex. The Florida lawmaker appears undaunted, touring with conservative Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and addressing an Ohio political summit this weekend.
At that GOP summit, Congressman Gaetz reportedly told the crowd he is being falsely accused of exchanging money for naughty favors. A reminder, Gaetz has not been indicted and has repeatedly denied the allegations against him. Anne-Marie, Vlad.
All right, Nikole, thanks very much. For more on this, we're joined by Matt Dixon. He's the Florida bureau chief for Politico. Matt, we know Gaetz's former associate, Joel Greenberg, is expected to plead guilty today and cooperate with prosecutors. What type of specifics and evidence would Greenberg have to offer in order to get a plea deal? Presumably, a plea deal for something like this, a heinous crime, sex with an underage minor. It's got to be good for federal prosecutors to agree to any kind of a deal.
Well, I think an appropriate frame of reference is just how many charges he was initially facing. I mean, not only is it a plea deal, but he was originally facing 33 charges. So they dropped over 24 for Joel Greenberg. And the biggest one that kind of jumps off the page that everyone is focused on, and rightfully so, is the trafficking of a minor, paying for sex. Greenberg admits in the plea deal that he paid $70,000 over a 2-year period for sex. That there's also, he was a tax collector in a county just outside of Orlando. There's a lot of public corruption charges, misuse of public money. So honestly, if there's beyond the sex trafficking, if there's a whole other category here, basically every single public corruption related charge a politician could face, Joel Greenberg is also facing. So the idea that he's, a minimum of 12 years as opposed to decades in prison, which is what he was originally facing, and the dropping of, roughly 24 charges, it's obviously they want to hear what he has to say, and they find it important.
So we saw in Nicole's piece that Matt Gaetz once referred to Greenberg as his wingman. I'm sure he's calling him something else these days. But what is or was the nature of their relationship?
Well, they've long been political allies. It goes back to 2015, 2016. They would often be seen together. They hung out, they partied together, as it's outlined in those court cases. And also, political allies. Matt Gaetz was, I'm based in Tallahassee, where the state capitol was. Matt Gaetz was a longtime state representative and sort of knew the halls of the state capitol very well. He helped open some political doors for Joel Greenberg. He would bring him up to Tallahassee from the Orlando area, which is about 4 hours away, from time to time. So the two, it was widely known sort of anecdotally that the two were very close. And I think the court papers and other documents that have come out as part of this investigation have only sort of strengthened the idea that the two were very close, or as your piece and Matt Gaetz just put it, Gaetz saw Greenberg as his, quote, wingman.
All right, so even in light of this new information, Gaetz' team does not appear to be too concerned over Greenberg's cooperation. In a statement, a spokesperson said, quote, Congressman Gaetz doesn't seem to be named nor referenced in Mr. Greenberg's plea. Congressman Gaetz has never had sex with a minor and has never paid for sex. He also goes on to say Mr. Greenberg has now pled guilty to falsely accusing someone else of sex with a minor. That person was innocent. So is Congressman Gaetz. The first question, I guess, Matt, does this change anything? And Anne-Marie brought up a good point during the commercial break when we were talking about this story. You know, it's been reported that Congressman Gaetz in the past has showed other members of Congress, you know, pictures that are inappropriate on the floor of Congress, in the halls of Congress. Now, that may not be illegal, but the notion that there are some members of Congress who may have been aware of Mr. Gaetz and his activities, including the Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who at this point seems unwilling to do anything. You know, they've kicked Liz Cheney out of the number 3 position of the Republican Party in Congress for simply not parroting the lie that Donald Trump, you know, did not win the election, or that Donald Trump did win the election, rather. And yet, with this, silence. So does any of this change the narrative for Congressman Gaetz?
Well, I don't think as far as he's concerned. For years, the first rule of the Matt Gaetz, political playbook is go on offense, is attack, is double down. When you're accused of something, don't shy away from it, lean into it. So the national tour he's sort of going on now, the posture he is taking publicly about these very serious allegations, and it should be noted, allegations, no charges have been filed against the congressman, but very serious allegations, and he's leaning into them is exactly what, I've covered Congressman and former state representative Gaetz for a long time. It's sort of exactly what I would expect, and sort of the posture that he is taking is what longtime Gaetz watchers would expect him to take. And I don't think anything moving forward is necessarily going to knock him off that sort of attack pedestal. So we don't know what's going to happen in the coming week or so now that Joel Greenberg is indeed going to plead guilty to some serious charges. But I would anticipate Matt Gaetz is going to greet whatever comes on offense.
Gaetz is not the first lawmaker to be linked to sort of sexual misconduct, and not all the time, but in some cases when there's one case that pops up, it's sort of like the loose thread on a sweater, and other things start to kind of unravel. Particularly to what Vlad and I were talking about over the break, that if there were other lawmakers who were aware of some of this behavior and they never sort of admonished him or spoke directly to him, is there a concern that, this case with Gaetz could actually sort of open, to use another metaphor, a Pandora's box of other cases or other issues for lawmakers?
There's always that potential, and especially since as explosive as the allegations are here, and Matt Gaetz is a big nationally known name. But over the past few years, including in Florida, we've had our own examples. I think people are starting to discover that state houses are sort of frat houses in a way. There has been allegations across the country about state level lawmakers, folks that we don't necessarily know nationally, and those sometimes in their states don't even know, of facing some serious serious charges and allegations related to wrongdoing. So inappropriate behavior, I think, probably is, if a Pandora's box was going to open to the degree that you're talking about, you would like to think that it would be open already, because we have seen, dozens and dozens of state level lawmakers face not allegations similar to this necessarily, because this is pretty explosive and there's trafficking allegations, but the idea that politicians do shady things in state houses and in the halls of Congress, I don't think is new. So maybe the broad sort of high profile allegations here might change something, but I mean, if past is precedent, I don't know that anyone should necessarily be holding their breath.
So true. Matt Dixon, thank you very much.
Thank you.